Atlanta, Georgia has been one of the more popular places for relocation since about 1991, when its population growth hit 5%, after hovering around 2.8% for over 2 decades. Things were happening in Atlanta. The music scene was booming, the Atlanta area had a growing tech and film industry, and it stayed that way till about 2001 when it dropped back down to 2.5% growth. And then in 2020, it finally fell below 2% growth for the first time since the Great Depression. In 2022, it looks like they'll only end up growing about 1.6%, and experts predict by 2027, Atlanta will start losing population. So the question is, why are fewer and fewer people choosing Atlanta as a place to call home? Well, we did a survey asking people why they don't want to live in Atlanta anymore. And in this video, I'm going to give you the 10 most common reasons they gave. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, it's too far from the ocean. Now, I think this one has a lot to do with who's been moving to Atlanta over the years. A majority of the people that moved to Atlanta over the last 2 decades came from California or Florida, 2 places that are known for their beaches. You know, they just don't have an ocean. Atlanta has some lakes and some rivers in the area. They just don't have the ocean, and I think that kind of bothered people a little bit. Atlanta has a lot of good things to do. They just don't happen to have an ocean 20 minutes away. Number 9, the heat and humidity. Yeah, that's one of the top 10 reasons people complain about Atlanta. I've said this before, that I read this quote and I thought it was great. Atlanta only has 2 seasons, summer and Christmas. The hottest month of the year in Atlanta is going to be July, where the average temperature is around 90 degrees. And it stays there. That's not like what it gets to a couple days in a row. It's normally going to stay like that all of July. The rest of the summer, it's going to be around 81 degrees, is their average. Again, during the summer in Atlanta, it can get up to 102 easily. Combine that with the humidity, Atlanta's not pleasant or comfortable during July, or in my opinion, August. I just don't like the heat. Well, apparently, going by the survey, a lot of other people don't like the heat of Atlanta either. If it's too hot, I just sit there and stare at people like I'm, I don't know, trying to do math in my head or something. Just get this like brain fog if it's too hot and humid. One other thing that goes along with that heat and humidity and that muggy feeling is it's gonna kill your allergies. If you have allergies and you move to Atlanta, be prepared. It's rough. Number 8, the bugs. This is a really weird one. Recently, I've been seeing that people will bring up bugs a lot more in different surveys. I've been doing this for quite a few years, and it just seems like the last couple years, bugs seem to be something people have an issue with when they're moving someplace. We were just talking about North Dakota, and people kept bringing up how bad the bugs were there. But I've spent some time in Atlanta. I've spent a lot of time in Georgia, and they do have some bugs, especially fire ants, mosquitoes, a lot of spiders. Termites are everywhere. And then, of course, in Atlanta, you're going to find a whole bunch of cockroaches. The fire ants you're going to find in the suburbs and right after it rains, which it does occasionally during the hottest months of the year, which helps the humidity climb. You're going to find a lot of fire ants after it rains. If you don't already know, warm air and moisture attract a lot of horrible insects. Not horrible like they're going to kill you, just they're everywhere. Number 7, they don't have the best public transportation. This was a big one for a lot of people that came from New York, Portland, Boston, places like that that have really good public transportation options. Atlanta's not one of them. They got MARTA, which has trains, buses, and paratransit vehicles, but it's not exactly the system that you want to have to rely on. It's also considered to be unsafe in some areas. That being said, they do have a new program that started in 2022 that by 2040 should be amazing. They're putting a lot of effort into it, so we'll see how that pans out in the next few years. But a lot of people complain that you have to have a car if you're living in Atlanta. And that leads us to the next one. Number 6, bad traffic. It is said that the average driver in Atlanta loses about 53 hours of their life in congestion every single year, with the cost per driver being about $820 over that same year. Atlanta's traffic is considered to be the 9th or 10th, depending on the study you look at, worst traffic in the United States. The city of Atlanta has about 498,000 residents. The entire metro area has a little over 6 million, making it the 8th largest metro area in the United States. And about 75% of the people that can drive. If you don't know how to get around Atlanta and you're driving, it's pretty hard in the beginning. They have this one area called Tom Moreland Interchange. Most people just call it Spaghetti Junction. So many transitions, off-ramps, on-ramps. It's ridiculous. Number 5, the homeless situation. Apparently, the homeless situation's getting kind of bad in Atlanta. I mean, it's bad in most major cities, but Atlanta's been picking up steam over the last few years. A lot of people in the survey said that the homeless situation in Atlanta is why they're either leaving or they're not going to move to Atlanta. I'm not sure if those people have seen what's happening in Los Angeles, San Francisco, or Portland, but to them it's gotten a lot worse in the last few years. Inside the Atlanta city limits, they say there's about 3,200 homeless, and in the entire metro area it's around 7,000. Now, I found other numbers that say it's as high as 10,000 in the metro area. Different organizations always have different numbers when it comes to that. Like all places that have a lot of people dealing with homelessness, 37% of the people living on the streets in Atlanta report having mental illness, while about 32% report having substance abuse issues. I know it's very popular for everyone to just say they're lazy. No, they're dealing with some stuff most of the time. In this case, about 69% of the people living on the streets in Atlanta are dealing with mental illness or substance abuse problems. Number 4, below average test scores. Atlanta is really not knocking it out of the park when it comes to their 12th grade and below. Atlanta has approximately 155 public schools. About 87% of the people in Atlanta have completed 8th grade. And Area Vibe gives Atlanta, Georgia schools an F. Their test scores, according to Area Vibe, are 27% below the national average. Now, their high school diploma rate's doing better. It's 4% above the national average. And their bachelor degree or better stat is about 59% better than the national average. That's not bad at all. I guess it's just their test scores aren't doing great. And when you got a kid high school and below, you're kind of looking at those things. And I think that's what's got this on the list. A lot of families, they look at that and it's a concern. But yeah, they get a big fat F from Area Vibes. That sucks. Number 3, the crime rate. Now, this is a perfect example of when the reality of a situation doesn't match what people's opinions are. Atlanta has crime. All big cities have crime. You know, when you have humans, you're going to have crime. Atlanta's not that bad, but people put it here as number 3. The crime rate in Atlanta is actually 24% lower than the national average. Their violent crime rate is also 24% lower than the national average. So there's nothing to complain about here. 1 in every 67 Atlanta residents will be the victim of a crime each year. That's not bad. When you got places like Detroit where it's like 1 in 18 will be the victim of a crime. Detroit's crime rate's 130% above the national average. So Atlanta with their 24% below the national average is nothing to be concerned about. But people think that that's the deal. They think there's crime. There is crime. It's not nearly as bad as a lot of other places in the United States. So I don't agree with this one, but a lot of people said it, so it goes on the list. Number 2, the air quality. Atlanta has some bad air. Anyone in Atlanta will probably agree with that the air kind of sucks in Atlanta. It's not the worst in the nation, but it's not great. From 2017 to 2021, Atlanta has made the worst 25 cities for air quality. Every year just outside the top 10, but still, doesn't have great air quality. The primary reason for the low air quality is Atlanta has a soot particle problem. Yeah, they got a lot of coal power plants, wood stoves, diesel emissions, other things like constant traffic, construction, and one of the largest airports in the country. The good news is the outlook for them in the future is pretty good. They may actually fall out of the top 25 here within the next 2 years, which is great. When you got bad air quality, when that summer hits, oh my God, it's just so much worse. It's already muggy, it's hot, and then you got poor air quality. Not good for someone with allergies or anything else like that. That's the other thing I talked about earlier is if you've got allergies, Atlanta might kill you. Not that bad, but it's pretty rough. So you got pollen, soot, car emissions, all the glitter that gets into the air from the various scrapbooking conventions they have in and around Atlanta every year. Just a deadly combination. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. And if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta, there's also a link for Home and Money. They will help you get a hold of a real estate agent in that area. They have a bunch of other tools on their website to help you if you're looking to buy a house. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, the high cost of living. Atlanta's got a pretty high cost of living. It's really not that bad, but compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, they've gone at a faster pace than a lot of other cities their size. When you count how high the rent is and home prices are in Atlanta these days, it's grown at a pretty fast clip, and the locals have noticed. Now, sure, if you're moving like from Los Angeles or New York City or Boston, you'll probably think the prices are kind of reasonable. But if you're from Atlanta and you've watched this get higher and higher, you know it's getting bad. bad. If you look at it with just the cost of living, not including housing and stuff, they're in the top 25. Depending on which survey you look at, they're usually around 22, 23, 24. Not that terrible. They're barely in the top 25, but they're there. Now, when you include the housing prices and rent prices, they start moving up the food chain a little bit higher. Myself, I don't think Atlanta's that expensive. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. I know what prices are there. I live in Portland, Oregon these days, or just outside, and our prices have climbed a lot in the last handful of years. Atlanta's kind of in the same boat that Portland is. The prices are just moving up too fast. And that was the #1 reason people said they were leaving Atlanta or they weren't going to move there, was the cost of living. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.